Good morning, everybody. It's Friday. Golly, we made it through 3 days of the week already. February 4th, and we we have the chair lady of the House Agricultural Committee, and welcome Carolyn Partridge to our meeting. And Michael O'Grady's with us, as well as our joint clerk, Linda Lehman. And this morning, we're going to be running through, Michael and is going to be running through the housekeeping bill from the Agency of Ag. And Carolyn, we've kind of figured out what the House is going to start with and what we're going to start with. And so we'll run through that. Carolyn can be with us for about 30 to 45 minutes, and we should have ample time to do what we need to do. So each side knows where we are. So again, welcome, folks, and good morning, Michael.
Good morning. What would you like me to start with?
Maybe we could start right with section 1 and indicate if that's going to be our section. I believe that'd be the Senate. Did you do a section 1 for both sides?
Basically, I formatted the House version as a committee bill because they still have the opportunity to do a committee bill, and I formatted the Senate versions just as sections.
Okay.
That's kind of what I'm asking. Do you want me to work with the House committee bill, or do you want me to work with the sections that are just for the Senate?
Well, Carolyn is with us, and I don't know if you really need to go through her sections, except for just a brief overview of that section, and then we move on until we get to our section 1. And our sections we could spend a little more time on, maybe.
Sure. So why don't I share my screen, and hopefully I can put the House draft committee bill up. I've been having problems with my Word on my iPad. It actually made me download the whole thing over again this morning, 5 minutes before I started. So I might have a problem.
Linda emailed it to us anyway, Michael, so we each have it.
Okay.
If we get cut off or something, we still got it.
It's also on the webpage. It's also on the webpage.
Oh, it is? Because I looked on the webpage and it.
Are you talking about the House or the Senate?
I'm talking about the House right now.
I will have it on there momentarily. The Senate is starting now.
Let me see if I can get it up on my iPad. Shoot. Yeah, I totally. Oh, wait a minute. Can you see my screen?
There you go.
Yep.
All right. There you go. Looks different, but so one of the things that I was asked to do was to categorize the agency's proposals into different subject matter, and the agency frankly did that on their own. And the first change it's an Act 250 change or municipal zoning change regarding what is an accessory on-farm business. You may have heard about the issue in Woodstock, Pomfret area, and whether or not that restaurant on that farm constitutes an accessory on-farm business. In the discussion of that, there was just discussion about how the definition is confusing. I really don't know what the agency's trying to do here other than clarify the 50% requirement. My only recommendation here was maybe bring in somebody from the Natural Resources Board to see if they're okay with this, because they're the ones that, and the municipal zoners are the ones that are going to be enforcing this accessory on-farm business provision.
So that's on the health side.
That's on all of these that I'm going to go through right now are on the House side.
Yeah.
The next one is in the general powers of administration for the agency. They want to be able to give electronic service of notice, usually during enforcement proceedings. And basically what they're saying here is that wherever in any of their statutes where there's a notice requirement, they can give electronic notice if the person consents to electronic notice. And electronic notice means notice by electronic mail, email.
Yep.
The next one is also a general administrative enforcement issue. Many other agencies have the ability to look at a applicant's enforcement history and determining whether or not they should grant an applicant's permit. This is giving the agency the ability to look at an applicant's existing enforcement history while they are looking at an application. This is pretty kind of standard language for a lot of regulatory agencies, and they want to just make sure that they have it specifically set out in their enforcement authority. Should I move on?
Yes.
Okay. The next few sections relate to the agency's authority to regulate under the Food Safety Modernization Act. A few years ago, when FSMA was being rolled out, there was concern about what authority the agency would have, because FSMA is actually a US FDA rule, and the delegated entity for enforcement of FDA in Vermont is the Department of Health. So what you did a few years ago is you gave the Agency of Agriculture the authority to enforce in Vermont the FSMA requirements for produce. And what they're doing here, honestly, I would say this is just clarification of the existing authority, because you can see in section 5, you already gave the Secretary of Ag the ability to enforce the FSMA requirements and the standards for the FSMA requirements. So what they're really doing here is clarifying that they're going to have this use the same definition of adulterated that's in Title 18, which is a Department of Health standard for food. And it's the same effectively as for FSMA. They're going to use the same definition of farm for FSMA. And that's important because when you go down further in this authority, that they are going to give themselves the authority to provide exemptions and modified requirements under FSMA. Frankly, I think it's already there, because you'll see right above in section 6, lines 9 through 11, that they have the ability to ensure compliance with the standards set up in FSMA. But I think what they're trying to do with the definition of farm that they're adding, and then the reference to the exemptions and modifications, that they want to be clear that the FSMA standard and scope of jurisdiction is going to apply, because there are a ton of exemptions under FSMA for certain produce that's not able to be immediately consumed, like I don't know, like spaghetti squash, because you can't just like pick that off the vine and eat it. it's not subject to some of the FSMA produce safety requirements. And so they just want to make sure that their authority and statutes are chewing up with FSMA's authority.
Yeah.
The next relates to mosquito control. I do have a question about this section. Basically, they want to be able to allow for in-kind services for the match for the mosquito grant program. You know, the mosquito control districts, the Lemon Fair, and they're largely on the eastern side of the state. They can apply for grants for the cost of application of larvicide, and they can currently provide in-kind services as their match, but right now it includes adulticide application, but they're taking away the old adulticide ability, and it's only going to be on larvicide. Now, the agency likes to focus on larvicide instead of adulticide because it's a different type of pesticide and different kind of application pattern. But I just wanted to flag that for you, that it wouldn't include adulticide for the in-kind authority anymore.
Yeah. Carolyn, you're going to be working on these sections we're running through right now.
Correct.
So you'll check that out.
Yes, we're going to have testimony. I have a very I don't know how I have a slight understanding of why they want to do that, but and it has to do with larvicide being more effective than adulticide. So
yeah, they definitely prefer larvicide. I would support that assertion.
yeah.
The next few sections relate to hemp. As you know, since you've all been on the ag committees for a while, the federal farm bill 2018 approved states regulation of hemp cultivation and the production of certain hemp products. Prior to 2018, Vermont had already established a hemp program, and there were some corresponding amendments that were made to the hemp statutes after 2018. But then the USDA issued its hemp rule, and it looked like it wasn't going to be possible for Vermont to run its own program. But maybe surprising to some, including me, USDA approved the state's hemp, I think it's called the Hemp Regulation and Manufacturing Plan. And so the state is now the entity that's going to be overseeing hemp cultivation in the state. But there are some important changes that need to be made to conform the statute to the USDA rule. The first, and you'll see it throughout these sections, is that the USDA rule doesn't refer to hemp as industrial hemp, it just refers to it as hemp. So the term industrial hemp is being removed from the section. And then the USDA rule allows for cultivation of hemp and the manufacturing of hemp products or hemp infused products. That's not very clear from the current statutes in Vermont. So what the agency is proposing is to include hemp products and hemp infused products under the definition of process. And then the next.
Has hemp it's always been considered an agricultural product, right?
Yes, and you'll see in the next section right down that you the General Assembly made that designation in statute, though that it is clear that hemp is an agricultural product. So you know you've been talking about cannabis and whether or not it's farming. Hemp is farming. Yeah. Hemp is it's an agricultural product. It's covered by the RAPs. It's eligible for use value. It's exempt from Act 250 municipal zoning. Hemp is an agricultural product as recognized by the USDA and the federal government.
So a
Bobby?
good reason. Yes,
Part of that, Mike, if you could just scroll up a little bit, part of that business on line 13 has to do with hemp concentrate. So it's adding hemp concentrate. I think that's the important part of that. But anyway, Michael probably knows better.
It's conforming with the USDA rule for what is allowed underneath the federal farm bill. And it includes, they didn't define what a hemp product or a hemp infused product was in the federal farm bill. So the USDA had to do it in the rule. And it's from something from hemp concentrate.
yeah.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Michael. No, it's Senator Pearson.
Yeah, sorry to jump in. Michael, could you remind us, are we still operating under a quote unquote pilot sort of framework in terms of the hemp program in the view of the feds?
No, the state plan was approved. So the state is the regulatory entity right now. I have to look at the effective date of the state plan, but I mean, theoretically, we could be under the pilot, but we're just going to transition right from the pilot into the state plan if we haven't already.
And we used to have to renew the pilot quite frequently. And so that's that's a small piece of it, but that day is, if it hasn't kicked in, it's about to, and so that sort of scheme is over. Is that what you're saying?
Basically, USDA now has an approved plan for Vermont, or Vermont has a plan that's been approved by USDA. USDA has oversight of that plan and on administration and enforcement of that plan. So it's very similar to a lot of the environmental programs. The state gets delegated to administer and enforce, but the federal government that is there is kind of, watching over the shoulder. In the environmental world, it's called override authority. If they don't like what the state's doing, they can override the state. It's pretty similar the way that the USDA rule is set up.
Thanks.
Okay. But the big issue is, remember a few years ago, there was the issue of what is referred to as the hot crop, because sometimes
Product that's above the
right.
Yeah.
And you didn't want to effectively remove all economic value or all options that a farmer could have in the use of that crop. So what you did is you gave the farmer the ability, you'll see on page 12, going on to page 13, the ability to enter into an agreement with a medical marijuana dispensary for the separation of the THC and then the return of the hemp crop to the farmer for the use of the hemp for whatever use the farmer wanted to use it for. Or they could sell the hemp crop to the dispensary in whole, or they could arrange for the secretary to destroy the crop. Well, the first two options are not options under the USDA rule. If it exceeds the THC, allowable THC level under the USDA rule, the crop needs to be destroyed. And so you're seeing that conforming change being proposed by the agency. So there's no opportunity to enter into an agreement with the dispensary to separate. There's no opportunity to sell the crop to the dispensary in whole. If it's over the 1 point, it's 1.0 on the USDA rule, then it's just destroyed.
Boy, would be a tremendous loss to the grower, the farmer.
Right. And what you don't see here, and which is included in the agency's plan that was approved, was enforcement provisions that are consistent with the USDA rule. And so everybody, including USDA, recognizes that a farmer that's sincerely growing and sincerely trying to keep underneath the THC, the allowable THC level, might exceed that level, especially depending on when the crop's going to be tested. So if that happens, that's called a negligent violation. And a farmer is allowed 3 negligent violations in 5 years, I believe, before they get kicked out of the program.
And
But-
no financial penalties?
Well, there are some opportunities for penalties for negligent violations, but when you look at the USDA rule, they're really trying not to penalize those people.
Yeah.
Because
If
they recognize
if
right.
they're legitimately trying to do the right thing.
Right, but if the state's approved regulatory authority or USDA determines that the crop was grown with a, I'm not going to get the standard right because it's with a mental state other than negligence, I believe it is, then that's a criminal violation and it has to be referred to the U.S. Attorney General.
Ooh. So, well, that's almost saying if somebody knowingly buys plants that are above the level, well, I mean, you know, maybe they should be penalized. But somebody selling the plants or the seed to a hemp grower, they should have a little responsibility too. You know, if they sell seeds of certain potential levels that are out of whack with hemp, you know, those folks ought to bear a little bit of the burden. I don't know how we write that in, but
it's in the USDA rule, and the provisions of the USDA rule are built into the state's hemp production plan. I'm looking at the hemp production plan right now, and it's the Senator Starr, what you've reflected as something that should be incorporated. It's basically incorporated into the state hemp production plan.
Yep, good.
Okay, should I move on?
Yes.
The next couple of sections relate to the creation of an invasive exotic plant advisory committee. And you'll see that committee is empowered to, where's its empowerment? To advise the secretary on noxious weeds. And that authority includes basically reviewing prohibited weed lists, making recommendations for eradicating or mitigating noxious weeds and in utility and transportation rights of way, including through the use of pesticides. So this seems seemingly taking over a role that the Pesticide Advisory Committee used to have, and specifically with regard to pesticide right-of-way permits. The one thing that I would like to note is it's called the Invasive Exotic Plant Advisory Committee, but all of its authority relates to noxious weeds. And there's no definition of noxious weed or invasive exotic plant in these sections. So I don't really know what they have authority over.
So as the house is gonna be doing these sections that
Yeah.
so maybe Carolyn, you can put a definition in there that would include, invasive, particles in right of way, and plants. I'd use 2 words there and make sure that you get the broadband wire that's chopped up and left in farmer fields right of ways to be addressed.
Bobby, my understanding is that this invasive exotic plant stuff already exists in rule, and that this is just putting it in statute. I've got to learn more about it to explain it better to you, but it's kind of the reverse of what typically happens. So we'll include like any kind of broadband wire or anything like that in the definition.
I think
Only
O'Brien
kidding.
would like that.
Okay.
Okay, Michael.
Okay. All right, I'll save my comment on the noxious weed thing, but
Come on,
the-
it makes us laugh. Go ahead.
no, it's okay. The next 2 sections relate to water quality permitting. The first relates to farms that are permitted under the medium farm. Under current law, if the medium farm general permit comes up, it has a term of 5 years, I believe. And basically at the end of the 5 years, the farm has to reassert its intention for coverage. And they have to submit that to their certification of compliance with the MFO rules to the secretary. And then under current law, that farm is supposed to be visited within 18 months of the agency receiving their certification to verify that they are actually having no unpermitted discharges to waters. And what the agency is asking for is for that visit within 18 months to be for those farms that have never been permitted previously as an MFO. It's both an administrative issue and a fact that if they get a complaint about an actual discharge, they will be investigating and visiting the farm much sooner than within 18 months. So it's kind of a practical change based both on the fact that they don't want to have to visit every MFO every time their permit coverage comes up. Plus that they're on these farms, enough to know whether or not
they have to be inspected every 3 years as it is.
Right.
Yeah. So,
So it's really kind of an administrative practicality thing. And then the last section is about small farm certification. The issue here is when a small farm that's subject to certification is transferred, there's a change of ownership or change of lease. The original small farm certification requirement required that there be a notice to the agency of that change of ownership. The agency is proposing to strike that.
Yeah. Does that happen now?
It's supposed to. I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't always happen.
I can't imagine how we'd get away with that if it was actually being done. I mean, why would a small farm have to notify the ag agency or any agency other than maybe current use, the tax department, and then, if they sell their property? I mean, I don't know what the purpose of that would be. I don't know.
It It was to maintain, one of the issues when you did small farm certification was the agency's valid assertion that they don't know who all the small farmers are, right? They did not have a database of who a small farm was. So they wanted to create that database and then to try to maintain some oversight of that. And so that's, from my recollection, why the change of ownership was built in.
Well, I don't understand why they wouldn't be able to build a database off their annual farm inspection, or I thought they were supposed to inspect these farms,
Right.
dairy producing farms at least every 2 years, I thought.
I think it's every 5 for the small farm.
Yeah, I think that's
Fine.
right.
Yeah.
Maybe that should be shortened up.
So anyway, it's that's
yeah,
I think that's an administrative question for them, whether or not it's even serving the purpose that it was intended to.
Yeah. Okay.
And then the last one is everybody's favorite issue: chicken and composting.
Yeah, love it.
So remember last year when you did the exemption from Act 250, it was for certified small farms that were either poultry farms or met the standard for amount of food residuals imported onto the farm. So what the agency is saying here is that that excludes certain farms that are not certified small farms, that fall below the threshold of what's a certified small farm. And what they're saying is that they're saying that your intent was that those non-certified small farms should have been able to be exempt from Act 250 and taken compost and food residuals. I don't know if that was your intent. And so,
Well, certainly the testimony that we received from, I think, a guy up in Standard, maybe. I doubt if that guy, I mean, we took a lot of information from that individual, and I doubt if they're a certified small farm. They're just a small agricultural producer of veggies and eggs and things like that. And committee, I would assume that we were thinking about these small guys that do composting. What's your thoughts on that quickly?
Carolyn has her hand up, Bobby.
Bobby, I think to help clarify, my understanding from the testimony we've heard so far from the agency is that a certified small farm that raises chickens is supposed to have a minimum of 6,250 chickens. And that was not what we intended.
No.
no, that's a little, that's yes and no.
Okay.
If they don't have a liquid manure handling system, it's 6,250. If they do have a liquid manure handling system, it's 2,250. And if they only have ducks, it's 375.
So
with a liquid manure, it's 2,500 without a liquid manure.
that's very helpful, but I don't think any of these farms we're talking about have liquid manure handling systems. And so so farms that have, let's say, 250, 300 chickens, I don't know, Michael, you can describe it better. That's that 6,250 chickens is what is in my head in terms of what Laura DePietro was saying.
Yeah.
And we just want to enable farms that have, hundreds of chickens rather than thousands to be able to do this composting.
Yeah, that was my belief as well.
Me too.
All right. So
Just to
that's,
can I just clarify? So those smaller farms with 300 chickens have not been able to do this and since we passed that, or this is just tidying it up?
I don't know, Chris. Oh, go ahead, Mike.
I don't think there's been any enforcement, Senator Pearson, if
Okay.
that's really your question.
Well, I suppose it is. Thank you.
But I mean, didn't you believe that we were allowing them to pick up and make their compost pile, the small guys that aren't below certification?
Yep.
I would say no, I didn't believe we were allowing it. I thought that was the point.
Yeah, it was.
Amen.
Okay, so we're all on the same page anyways.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah,
So those are all of the provisions in the housekeeping committee bill.
Okay.
I'm going to stop sharing screen.
Yeah.
Bobby, do you have any more questions? Do you have any questions for me? I've got to get ready to tunnel out of here.
Committee, if any of you have questions for Carolyn?
Nope.
If
You
you
look
guys
good
are,
taking, you'd look good in Corey's place, Carolyn. Maybe
Yeah.
he wants to get back to the house or something, or he's sitting in your seat over in the house.
yeah, yeah, no, I'm not interested in trading actually. But
Thank you,
for the
Carolyn.
offer.
I do have a quick question, Mr.
Sure.
Chair. Carolyn, in your monitoring of our work, have you had the pleasure of watching our committee and listening to the chair speak on YouTube at double time? Because I must say I did this last night and it is well worth the price of admission. For everybody else, you have to slow it down to 1.5 time, but for the chair, it works at double time. And it's quite something.
Can I just share something with you, Chris? And that is that I'm actually aware that some lobbyists, when they monitor your committee, they actually listen to it at least 1.5 times.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Well worth it for your weekend.
Try it. Any particular day that really is good, I'll try it out.
Yeah, well, we're gonna start charging for listening.
Good.
Thank
And
you,
by the way,
Carol.
if you guys want that noxious weed thing, you're welcome to it. But
Yeah,
we'll
you
take
just-
that.
You have
You
got the
take it.
backbone to put noxious wire in there, right?
Right. Yeah, right. All
Yeah.
right, gang. Hey,
Yeah.
listen, I look forward to seeing you back in the State House. It's really nice to be back there. But it's good to see you on these little tiles as well.
Well, thank you, Carolyn.
You are so welcome. You all have a good weekend. We'll see you.
You too. Thanks.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Chris,
Okay.
when you meant, is that when it freezes and then it tries to catch up to itself again? Is that what you mean?
No, you can somewhere in the YouTube settings, you can listen to it at 1.5 or 2 times the speed.
I didn't know
And
that.
so I was catching up on yesterday morning's testimony and I thought, oh, I'll try this double time. And it worked great as the chair was introducing everything. And then actually I noticed, I think it was you that sort of said, Bobby, what up? And I thought, boy, why is that so fast? And it was clear that Bobby's voice is made for 2 time, but the rest of us 1.5 is about the max.
Yeah, well, you guys talk too much and too many words come out that don't mean anything. Well, anyways, Michael, now we have our sections to run through.
Okay, I'm going to go to the committee page for this. So give me a second I'm going to go off Zoom for just 1 second, open my committee page, and then make sure that the document is there.
Yeah.
Okay, I am gonna now share screen.
Committee, go ahead, Michael's ready to go, so.
Okay. Should I start?
Sure, yeah.
So the first section is a general Agency of Agriculture Enforcement Authority. You might remember when you were talking about creating the assistance program for the dairy margin coverage program, Diane Botfeld asked whether or not good standing meant good standing with all agency regulatory programs or just with the water quality programs.
Yeah.
And in that discussion, you said it should be all agency regulatory programs. That's what this section is saying. It's saying that good standing for a grant exclusively awarded by the agency means that you don't have an active enforcement and violation that's reached a final order with the secretary. And it's for every program, except that they're going to maintain the good standing requirements for water quality separate for those water quality grant programs. Because they've already got a system set up for that, and they don't really want to change that system.
And they're only going to use the water quality standards for that?
Well, for that one, they have to build in A&R enforcement as well. So that's why it's a little different, and that's why they want to keep it separate.
You didn't talk with the agency in regards to what other problems do they pick up on farms?
Well, it's not only on farms. Remember that they enforce slaughterhouses, weights and measures, livestock, etc. And so it's
all those.
It's all those, and one of the programs that they have, I wouldn't say a lot of issues with, but recurring issues. It's in weights and measures, and so they want to be able to use this provision for programs like that as well as for the water quality program.
But I would assume, and we can get into this discussion probably another day, but I would assume that it would really, if you had an application in from Working Lands and you were going to get $50,000 and you were fighting with the agency over some small issue, but it was an argument over interpretation of the statute or the fine. I can see where they would use this as a crutch to entice the individual to pay it off rather than negotiating fine down or whatever.
Well, that's what happened in the last area assistance program, the CRF program, when there were those 3 farms that weren't in good standing. The opportunity to access those CRF funds made those farms come into compliance pretty quickly.
Yeah, but they gave half their money away back to the state to cover some things that were pretty questionable. And, I don't know if that's good or not, but we can discuss this when we get into the pros and cons of the bill. I don't know if the committee has any feeling on this, but anyways, go ahead, Michael.
Okay. So moving on to section 2, it's the water quality sections. Remember last year, you basically gave the agency the ability to regulate waste that were coming onto a farm, and certain issues from waste that were on the farm. They want to be clear that that authority includes the importation of material onto a farm. And so that's partly, the issue you heard from the multiple witnesses the other day about the residuals issues. And Laura specifically, I think, wants to be clear that they have authority over those materials that are being imported onto the farm. And similarly, I'll get to it in a minute. The next section relates to waste storage facilities. This is actually one of the first agricultural statutes I worked on way back in the day. And it deals with the standards that manure pits are constructed to. And if there is an allegation that a manure pit is leaking and poses a threat to human health or the environment, that the agency has to go out and do the initial monitoring and has to pay for the initial monitoring to determine that there isn't a threat to human health or the environment. In 2006, the standard that was being used was whether or not it was a violation of the state groundwater protection standards. The state groundwater protection standards have changed significantly in the last 15 years, and it's really just it's not the appropriate reference anymore. So it's still, the secretary still needs to go out and determine that the facility is meeting the standards for NRCS construction, right? And that's in subsection A. And then they have to determine that the facility does not pose a threat to human health or the environment. And the agency would still need to do initial groundwater monitoring if they suspect that this facility may be contaminating groundwater. So there's still the NRCS standard, still has to be built to that standard, still cannot pose a threat to human health or the environment. Secretary still does the initial monitoring if there's suspicion of contaminated groundwater. And then if there is a determination that the facility poses a threat to human health or the environment, because after that monitoring, a violation of the groundwater protection standards, because now that's an appropriate reference, the secretary basically can work with the facility owner to come into compliance.
Michael, can I ask you if the word apparent on line 6 is a normal? That seems to me pretty loose.
Yeah, and it's something I wanted to talk to you and to the agency about. I think it's because of the nature of how the testing is done. When this was first enacted in 2006, the issue was, it was in East Montpelier, and it was a household that was downgrade from a farm. It was a significant distance, over a half a mile to a mile away from the farm and the storage facility. And there had been significant testing around the home, but they couldn't really determine where the pollution was coming from. And so they had to it was Phil Benedict, and Phil went out and did a series of tests and determined that apparently it was coming from the farm. And he couldn't say for sure, but it was his determination that it was from the farm. I think that's the type of situation that they want to give themselves the ability to respond to, but it's something you should talk to them about because it provides them with significant discretion.
Yeah, thank you.
I would think in that particular case you were describing, Michael, that they could do some test wells in between the two, within that half a mile, and pretty much determine if it was coming from that pit.
But that's what Phil did. And I think his concern was he wasn't sure from what the test results were that the pit was the sole source, right? Because from what he could determine from the results, it was contributing, but he didn't think it was contributing all of the issue. And so that I think was part of what the agency, how the agency responded. And Phil and I wrote this section.
Yeah.
And so it took a while, but it got to the point, and it was based on that scenario in East Montpelier.
Yeah. Well, it's good having you with us then, because you helped put it together, or probably did put it together from suggestions. So we'll know,
Sure.
we can use you as a resource. Yeah.
So
Okay.
the next section relates to the non-sewage waste, the issue you were talking to the multiple witnesses about the other day. And one of the things that Laura DePietro referenced in that discussion is that the agency and the authority that you grant to them doesn't have the ability to approve or disapprove the import or use of that non-sewage waste in a manure pit or digester. And this language gives them that ability. They basically, the person transporting or arranging for the transport of the non-sewage waste has to seek the approval of the agency in order to transport it to the farm.
Yep.
The section 5, it's from the agency's position at cleanup. The state used to provide incentive grants for the development of nutrient management plans. The rationale for removing this section is that the state doesn't actually provide those grants anymore, that it's all provided through UVM extension. And so they say this program is no longer needed.
And do you know if that's accurate, or?
I know that they haven't had funding in the last couple of years for these grants.
Yeah, and I wonder how must be through UVM extension or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll have to check that out.
Okay. The next is the Capital Assistance Equipment Program. This is actually partly related to the Climate Action Plan, and it's related to the Dairy Task Force as well. So this Capital Equipment Program, you'll see that on page 8, line 11 through 14, that it provides aid for reduction of surface water runoff, improvement of water quality, reduce odors from manure application, separation of phosphorus, decrease greenhouse gas emissions, and other reduced costs to farmers. But when you get further into this section, you'll see that it's really focused on water quality and specifically manure application. And so what the agency wants to do is to broaden the eligibility under the Capital Equipment Assistance Program to be for grants that are more consistent with the purpose that I just read through in subsection A, 10 through 14. So not just for water quality or for manure application, but for greenhouse gas reductions, phosphorus separation, odor issues. And so the changes here are to allow that, and most specifically getting rid of the reference to manure application separation, and just to achieve the purposes of the section. Now that manure application separation and nutrient management, this section used to only be about manure application. Like, it was called the Innovative Manure Application Assistance Program. And over the years, it's just evolved to be about capital equipment. And now they want it to be about all of the purposes that are in subsection A.
Yeah, is there any preference given to water quality though, like first preference or any of that, Michael?
There is a priority system in subsection C, and it's basically based on a water quality priority system, and it's
Well,
Lake
the only
Champlain,
reason
Bedford,
I-
Jamaica.
Yeah, the only reason I bring that up is, in the last few years, 90% of our phosphorus that's been removed from the lake has been through, I believe, this program. And I certainly want to make sure that gets first. I would think we should continue that should get first priority, because the low hanging fruit has been picked, and the next higher fruit, you've got to get a step ladder to get up there. It's going to take some money, and I don't want to shortchange our water quality program to start these new incentives, but if there's extra money, that would be fine. But we can talk. Go ahead.
So this is just one of the water quality financing programs. There are a few. So when you said it's through this program, it's really through the water quality assistance program that's in subchapter 3 of chapter 215. And that there's this program, the capital equipment assistance program, there's the CREP program, there's the ARMS program, the agriculture environmental management program, there's farm agronomic practice. So it's not just this program that's addressing water quality. It is a big part of it, but it's not just this program.
Yeah.
But what I was going to ask, Michael, is by broadening the purposes that would fall under this grant application, wouldn't that mean that there'd have to be more money for it?
I do think that is a discussion for the appropriations committees, and you probably would need more money if you're going to follow some of the recommendations of the climate action plan and the dairy task force.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
more money, more people, more cars, more of everything, Brian.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to add on to the ag building to rent some more office space.
With one-time money.
Yeah.
Okay.
But Rutland County's gonna have to put in the balance at the end.
Okay.
Go ahead, Michael.
So the next change is to the farm agronomic practices program. This is a program right now that is focused on providing assistance to specific types of activities. And you'll see those specific types of activities on page 10, cover cropping, strip cropping, zone or no tillage, etc. What the agency is looking to do is to broaden their ability to use assistance under this program, not just for those specific practices, but for soil-based practices that improve soil quality and nutrient retention and increase crop production. So they'd be giving themselves some discretion in determining what activities would be financed. But they're arguing that this gives them more flexibility and it removes the constraints on using these specific activities.
Do you have a sense of the funding that is in place now is being used 100%? In other words, is there money left over, or every time you widen the purpose of something, you run the risk of running out of money faster?
I don't know. Just kind of a brief history of this program. It started out as just like a kernel in Senator Catel's head one morning in committee, and she made it happen. It went into session law, and everybody thought it was going to fail, and it did really well. And it got put into statute and continued to do well. And was pretty popular for a while. It fell off in popularity a little bit. I'm not sure why, but it still provides funding. I don't know if all of the money is being used right now. I think what the agency wants to do is, because of things like the ecosystems working group, the climate action plan, dairy task force, they want to have a little bit more flexibility to use this money for soil-based practices.
Okay. Thank you.
And there's one more change. And actually there's two more changes. This is just a technical amendment. It's in one of the agency's rulemaking authorities for regulation of large farms. It wants to change acceptable to required. This is really just a technical change to reference the RAPs, which used to be the AAPs. And that's it.
So on that last one, standards for acceptable, and changing that to standards for required ag practice. What is the big change there, Michael? What was the reason?
It's because it's because the statute no longer references the AAPs, the acceptable agricultural practices. 6 VSA 4810 now requires the agency to adopt required agricultural practices. It's just a technical change. It's just a technical change to the correct reference.
Okay. Yeah. Well, very good.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing.
Yep. So, questions from committee members or Michael on the overview?
Not for Michael, but I'd like to, obviously, we have the agency in, because I do want to check and see, if they're allocated X amount each year for some of those practices, are they using every last dime of it? And if by widening and broadening the purpose, it's necessarily going to mean more funding, we should probably take a look at that.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Is Steve the one over there that's sort of in charge of this, looking after this, or does he just bring somebody along, or?
He's the one that sent the language over. I think for some of the specific changes, for the water quality stuff, you want to talk to Laura. For the general enforcement stuff, I think you want to talk to Steve.
Yeah, so we'll have to switch
Yep.
department heads and things as we move forward. And So anyways, that was a good overview of what they're asking for. And we've got it divided up now so that we know what we've got on our plate, and the House is got their work. Are there any more questions on this? I had it down that we were going to get this overview, and but we've got some things hanging that we haven't really taken care of. Like we talked a lot about the letter and moving the to UVM and the paragraph from down. And I don't know if we ever voted on as a committee if that was fine with everybody. Did we end up agreeing on the letter as it was finally drafted?
Well, we talked about it yesterday, and I know I sent the email back to Michael saying, this looks great to me,
Yeah.
etc. So, yeah.
So
Yeah, I did the same.
yeah. So we're good on that. And then S 188. I'm still getting people that want to come. Graham wants to come back. And John Rogers sent me an email. He'd like to come in and testify on that. And in his email, he talked about outside and inside small plots should be both considered ag. And I know we discussed that, and we felt that a small plot was grown on a farm. That did we come to any decision on that?
Thought we said outdoors has to be with no artificial light.
And what about
And
indoor?
that's in definition by the board, by the way. So that the draft is in parallel with them already.
We would consider greenhouses to be outdoors unless they use artificial light. We do have it on the agenda. I looked ahead for next Tuesday.
Yeah.
S-188. So hopefully we can resolve the other issue with the intersection of federal law and ours.
Yeah. So I'll invite, have Linda invite John and Graham back in.
Sure.
And do we have any other outstanding issues in S-188 that we need to address, that any of you, so we can get it done? Brian?
Yeah. Well, we hadn't, I don't think, come to a final decision about the size of the plot. We were, and I'm certainly amenable to continuing discussions there. Bryn had sent the 6 dimensions, if you will, of the plot, and it was clear at least that the board wasn't going to do anything licensing the top tier. So whether we do or not, I guess it doesn't really depend on that, but it was just one of those things that I noted. And I'm not against making it larger than the 1,000 square feet. I think certainly you can make a case for agriculture being agriculture, no matter how big or small it is. So that was one thing. How big the plot? I don't think we've decided on that. And then again, we don't want to put the agency in peril with the federal government. So we've got to hear from Steve, I guess, again on that. And if it's very clear that we're still okay to do it, I think I'm fine.
Yeah, Michael, have you had discussion on that with any of your legal counterparts? If we call this, small plots or agricultural, or that this is an agricultural product, and the agency is involved in whatever, setting it up or inspection or any of that stuff, are they gonna be put at risk with other federal programs?
I think I referenced the other day, and then I referenced again this morning, the requirement under the USDA hemp rules that if they find plants that exceed the standard, that they're supposed to destroy them. And I referenced the other day an NRCS document from California from 2018, I believe, where NRCS was going out, and California had an approved hemp program, pilot program. And NRCS employees were asking, what do I do if I find pot? If I find cannabis? And it's a really interesting, it's an interesting guidance document, because in one respect it says, well, if they're NRCS grantees, then they signed a grant agreement that says they have to have a drug-free workplace. And that means that they can't be manufacturing or producing drugs there, or in possession of controlled substances there. So, but then in the other respect, they said, well, under the NRCS agreement and the Enabling Act, we're supposed to keep everything that we find there confidential unless it relates to our authority. So they're not going to inform, right? And so you've got, all right, it has to be a drug-free workplace, but they're not going to inform on that farm for its production. And that kind of makes sense, because in the drug-free workforce requirements, they give the business notice that they have to come into compliance. I don't know how that's going to work. I don't know how the agency interplays with that. That's really kind of a question I have for Steve, and maybe for Laura, because she works a lot with the NRCS programs. What is the agency going to do if they're the hemp regulator and they go out onto a farm to do a water quality issue and they see cannabis? What do they do? I don't know.
Well,
It reminds me of the old TV show with Colonel Klink, I See Nothing. I mean,
yeah,
it does put them in a bad position.
Chris, I think he's got the resolve for this.
That's not true.
Oh.
But in terms of the hemp statute, Michael, and the draft we were just looking at, assuming that were law, is that sort of a blanket? If you find a hemp plant, which THC cannabis would be, that's over 0.1 or whatever, it's got to be destroyed. Is that just period, or only for somebody with a hemp permit? That had been my understanding. So I'm trying to understand just how applicable that little piece is.
So I'm going to the state hemp production plan. I'm in the enforcement section. It does focus on producers, and so producers are those that are registered. But they also have to enforce the registration requirement, right? So if you're growing hemp without a registration, that's a violation.
Right. So maybe we have to say unless otherwise handled somewhere.
Yeah. So these are all questions for the agency, and I don't have answers.
Well, sometimes you're better off not to kick the dog. I mean, I know how bureaucrats operate, and it's not it's never impressed me too much. They read too much between the lines, added to the lines, and nobody, to my knowledge, nobody has brought this issue up. Certainly not in our committee, and I don't recall anybody bringing it up. But in how many years we've been working on cannabis? Have you been in on this from the get-go, Chris? Has that ever come up?
I don't recall.
It has, because it was a key part of the discussion about whether it should be farming or not, right?
Yeah.
Because you clearly said that hemp was, and that the agency had regulation over that, and the agency said, fine, we've been doing it, and we'll work towards getting the approved state plan. But then he said cannabis wasn't. And although I think some people at the agency would have liked to have regulated cannabis, that was a policy decision. But you didn't have that overlap anymore, right? It's just like they only went out and regulated hemp. They weren't, and if they found, and they were only going to their producers. Now they have this state production plan that says they're supposed to report anything that is not hemp.
Well, maybe we should do that and let the Cannabis Control Board do all the regulating and just call it agriculture, but don't give them any authority. What would be wrong with that?
But they have authority over the rest of it, even if you carve them out, don't they?
Over
so they're inspecting. Well, they're inspecting your, soy crops.
Well, but if you're growing a garden, they don't go and inspect that, do they?
Well, they could. That's the point. I mean, not my garden, but if it's on a farm that they do regulate for, they have. I mean, I like the thinking. I think we need to be really careful here. This is not what it seemed, as simple as it seemed.
You just looked at their authority to go onto a farm to inspect produce for under FSMA, right? They have that authority. They can go onto a farm.
But with produce, but if they're commercially selling that, right?
Right. And now with what they're proposing, it has to meet the definition of a farm under FSMA, which is, and there's, as we already discussed, a bunch of exemptions and a bunch of modified requirements, but yeah, they have to be basically selling the produce in commerce.
Well,
I think we hear from Steve, we're starting to get I'm starting to get a sense of the pitfalls and the potential conflicts. And, I got to believe he's thought about it, and maybe Carrie have thought about this more. I mean, it seems to me that with Michael and one or two of them together, we can hash it out and see. And maybe there's not a path, and maybe we have to just keep kind of keeping it cloaked a little bit.
Well, maybe next week, I think we ought to let the lawyers and Carrie talk about this and come to us with a modification, no go, fix it this way, or with some alternative methods, rather than us trying to sit in the
Yeah.
middle of it and mess it up. Would that be something, Michael, that would be okay or appropriate for you to work on?
That's if you want me to do that, the committee wants me to do that, I will do that. I can. You said Steve, but I assume you also mean Bryn and
Sure, Pepper.
Pepper and David Schur.
Because we really want to get these guys covered under ag, but yet it's got to be done just so, or everybody's going to get into trouble, or the program will get into trouble. And we certainly don't want to cause that. So what do you guys think? Is that fine with you guys?
Yeah. Yep.
And I think Steve's supposed to be back next week, Michael.
Yeah, he's already scheduled on Tuesday.
Yeah,
Right.
but you know, if Monday or whenever you guys can get together, we'll still do testimony on Monday, and we'll you know, sometime next week, if you guys get a chance to work on that, it would be fine.
Sure. So I will email. Well, I have Steve and Bryn's email, so I'll just email them. But I can tell Bryn that if she wants to bring Pepper or Schur, she can. We'll
Yeah.
set up a time to do it.
Yeah. Anything else on this issue that we thinking about people? Is there somebody that we may want to? I think we're, you know, we figure out the plot size and get this definition straightened around.
Yep.
We should be somewhat ready to go. Well, very good.
I have one other question on unrelated issue. It's the letter to FSIS about the personal use slaughter. I didn't get any feedback from you about if you wanted changes or if you wanted anything done with that.
I thought it was perfect.
Yeah, it looked fine, Michael.
Okay, great.
Yep.
And do you need a signature on both of those, or how do we do that when we aren't in town?
I can arrange for that.
Okay, yeah, that would be good. Did you have anything else, Michael?
No.
No.
And Senator Starr, I'll send you a copy of the letter with your signature on it. And you can just say, send it out, and then I'll send it out.
Yeah, very good. Thanks. Well, next week, anything you guys want to get on the schedule for next week? It's getting pretty well filled up. Linda, would you want to run over that for the members quickly, or have you sent it out?
Yeah, Tuesday, you're going to have the Farm to School program. It's Farm to School Week. And you're going to have people from AAFM and Betsy Rosenblatt, Helen Nordvert from NOFA, and Connor Floyd from the Agency of Education. And then at 11:15, Michael and Stephen Collier are coming in on S188, as well as Graham and John Rogers from the Vermont Farmers Hemp Company. Wednesday, Vermont Housing.
I'm sorry, Linda, but is that the John Rogers?
Yeah.
I've got to prep. I got to get ready.
Going to bring his big magazine and his AR-15. No. Go ahead, Linda.
And then Wednesday after that, you have S188 again with a possible vote, as I understand it. And at 10:30, you'll take up the housekeeping bill again, and hopefully by then, Michael will have talked with Bryn and Pepper, etc., and can be there. And then Thursday, your morning is filled with joint hearings. The Working Lands Enterprise Initiative will be from 9 to 10:30. And Rural Vermont and NOFA Vermont are bringing in their members from 10:45 to 12 for a joint hearing with House Ag. And then I assume on Friday, you'll want to get back to the housekeeping bill.
Yep. And so we've got a little time in there to put other stuff in if if it comes up. Anything else from any of you folks?
Nope.
If not, you can take us off, Linda.